Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 3 of Defiance of Silence, a Sacred Witness podcast. It's Val, your host. This season, I'm calling it A Field of Human Stories. Stories of trauma and healing, grief and resilience, loss and meaning. Not because one story has all the answers, but because there's something powerful that happens when we witness one another honestly. Today's story belongs to Breanna. Breanna is a Navy veteran, suicide prevention specialist, and a moral injury specialist who works alongside veterans navigating some of life's most difficult experiences. More than that, though, she's someone who has spent years sitting with people in pain, helping them discover they don't have to carry it alone because she's been there. She gets it. In this conversation, we explore moral injury, military sexual trauma, healing, and hope, and the ways that community can help us find a way back to ourselves after difficult experiences. But most of all, this conversation is about what becomes possible when we tell the truth about what we've carried. I'm grateful you're here to witness it. I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. Before we begin, though, I'd like to invite you to take one slow, deep breath. Notice the chair beneath you. Feel your feet on the floor. Allow yourself to arrive exactly as you are. No judgment here. And as always, take what serves you and leave what doesn't. Here's my conversation with Breanna. Breanna, welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. I have been really looking forward to this conversation. You and I share a passion for supporting veterans and women, and we have already had a couple of good conversations surrounding all of this. So I can't wait for us to just talk about all the things that led up to what brought you to where you are today. And specifically around supporting those with PTS and moral injury and the difference between those two things. I think it's fascinating what you do for a living and how you got there. So without further ado, let's talk about Volunteers of America and how did you find yourself there? What is Volunteers of America and what do you do there?
Um, well, I found myself there almost by accident, by by the universe. I got fired from a job. Emotionally, I was not doing so hot, just got divorced. I was looking for jobs. It was right after Christmas. And then I went in for an interview at Volunteers of America. All I saw was healthcare and veterans. And I was like, cool, that's what I love to be. I went in. I almost didn't get the job because I swear there was this drop dead beautiful woman that was interviewing for the same job before me. And I knew immediately. I was like, okay, she's smart. She's beautiful. Like, I'm just a veteran and I'm here, like, have my healthcare degree and my bachelor's in healthcare administration, and I'm shooting for the wind. Luckily, they took a chance on me and I got hired on as a healthcare navigator. So I was helping veterans that were homeless or nearly homeless, part of the SSVF program that's there, navigating our crazy healthcare system. Whether it be community care, VA, trying to get VA disability benefits, anything and everything under the sun, dental work. And that's really what started driving my passion to continue helping veterans. I left the military community for so long because of what happened to me and what I was experiencing. And, I met my kids' father in the military. And so I really just was like, I'm done with it. Don't want to be a part of it. And so when I came back to it, I started to love what I do. It wasn't just a job, it was a passion. And then 2 years later, I had the opportunity to help be a moral injury specialist because VOA was just bringing them in as coordinators. And we only had one coordinator for a very long time. Shout out to Corey. He's holding down the moral injury coordinators. And so they trained the healthcare navigators on what moral injury is. And I immediately was drawn to it. Like, it was one of those aha moments of like, that is what I've been experiencing. And so I worked with Corey, and then moral injury specialist positions. Once we got the Sergeant Fox grant opened up, one of the other guys moved, and I had my boss call me and be like, Bree, you've been pushing and helping with moral injury. I want you on my team. And I was like, that's without a doubt a question. Like, yes, like that's not even a question to me. Like, I'm moving over. And so I moved over and became a moral injury specialist. And it kind of just started going up from there. Working with veterans with suicidal ideation, with military sexual trauma, with PTS or PTSD, substance use. I mean, it was a spectrum of veterans that I was working with that were not only like low AMI, but a spectrum people that were making over 200K a year. You know what I mean? So I was working with a wide range of veterans, but we were all experiencing kind of the same stuff, no matter where you were on that income spectrum.
Yep.
So, with that, I kind of grew into this position and being the only female on my team, I really started to focus in on women with military sexual trauma because that's a story that I can relate to, that I've shared experience with. And by the by the grace of God, I have an amazing supervisor that was like, "Let's do this, Bree." And so that's when we started to open up specific groups, specific Pacific. I always get those specific groups. Oh, I swear I have a doctoral degree.
I went to college.
I went to
Girl,
college.
I do
I
it too.
swear. My kids do it all the time, and like we talk about hippocampus, and they always go, "It's a hippocampus," and I'm like, "It's a." Now I can't even say it anymore.
Now, which is
A
it? I'm
hippocampus.
questioning myself. It's
So
so cute. It just shows we're human. That's all.
yeah, and so yeah, so then we started virtual groups because we realized even though that there are female veterans that are out there, we are few and far in between, and especially in states of Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota, that's already rural and so spread out. And so I got approval to do virtual groups, and so we
And these are,
started.
sorry to interrupt you. These are
No, go
virtual
for it.
groups for specifically for MST veterans.
Yes.
Okay.
The very first group that we did, there wasn't a specific book for that just had military sexual trauma in it. They had like little add-ins that we could do with it, but we just did the book that everyone else did. Um, but it kind of grew from there. Fortunately, Kevin and I keep my boss, Kevin and I started talking about having like specific material for military sexual trauma and specific stories and different things that we could do. And it grew into our first retreat last year. So we did these virtual groups, and then we had our first retreat, and that's when I met Janine. Shout out Janine, love her. I know she's going to listen to this. I met Janine, and she became my co-facilitator for the very first female-only military sexual trauma moral injury retreat.
She's a
Um,
pioneer for sure.
Oh my gosh,
And
that woman.
shout out to Janine. If you've been following Defiance of Silence, she was in season 1 and she is amazing. I'm not going to tell you anything else. You have to go back and listen to her episode. Hi,
Yeah.
Janine.
Hi, we love you. But yeah, so once we did that, we realized that there's so many more women suffering, and they're suffering in silence.
Mm,
And you know, the statistics of 1 in 3 veterans and 1 in 50 men report military sexual trauma by the VA. And so this year, when we did that same retreat, because there was a lot of success with that, um, when we opened up the retreat in January, within a couple of months, it was already filled.
wow. How many are you doing a year?
Right at the beginning, it was just one.
Mm.
So last year, we only did one. And this year, because it filled up so fast, I got a phone call from Kevin, and he was like, "Hey, Bree." And I was like, "Ugh, let's do it." Like,
Oh,
if it filled up within a couple of months, like, there's a need, there's a want,
yeah.
and there's a desire to heal. Like, we're at a point now where women are taking control and starting their own healing journeys, without needing permission. They're just doing it. And so for that, we wanna meet the demand. And we opened up another retreat. The one that we have at the end of the year in September is in Cody, Wyoming. This one is in Boulder, Montana. And this is already starting to fill up as well. So I'm more than, I believe halfway filled. And we just opened it up like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Wow. And these retreats, how long are they and who qualifies for them? Is it just any female veteran with military sexual trauma, or how does that work?
So these retreats, they last from Friday to Sunday. We start usually about 2 o'clock on Friday. It's a structured program. We have a workbook that we work through. We have different things that we have structured. And, Saturday morning is a really tough day because earlier you were talking about your story and the reason why you do this. And one of the big things about telling your story is that it helps move pain from silence into meaning,
Hmm.
which is so important. Sharing your story can help reduce isolation, release intense emotions, help survivors really reclaim their identity. And so we work through all of this. What's the difference between loss and grief? What's healthy grief? What's unhealthy grief? Forgiveness, self-forgiveness, which was the hardest thing for me.
Yeah, that
Um,
is hard.
I can forgive others. I give people benefit of the doubt all the time, but
For
I
sure.
mess up one little pencil
For
mark
sure.
and
For
I'm just
sure.
destroyed.
Sometimes I'm like, why do I do that? Because I know better. And like, I can tell you, you need to give yourself some self
Yep,
compassion there, Breanna.
yep.
And I'm over here like, oh my God, I'm the worst. Like,
I
why? Why do I? And I can catch myself catching myself now, at least, and like recognize, like, no, 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 this is not okay. Like, let's take those little internal family members and like pat them on the back. That it's okay. But it's such hard work. So I can see why these retreats are so important. And I know like going to a weekend retreat is not going to cure someone of all the things, but there's
no,
something about being seen and witnessed, and that's the premise of this podcast, is being a sacred witness. There's something so beautiful about what you're describing, is being able to tell those things that happen to you without getting involved in all of the dramatic details about it, but just being seen and saying like, this is what happened to me. And I know for myself, and that is how I met Janine. Actually, it was a very first veteran event that I ever went to as a woman veteran, because I also did not identify as a woman veteran. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I've shared before that if I were to, this was my distorted thinking, that if I shared with you that I was a veteran, then that meant that I was going to have to tell you what happened to me, which is so not true. But instead of me being able to be proud of my service and say, this is what I did in the military, here's where I deployed, here's the things that I did. And I did some really cool stuff. And it gave me a foundation for the career that I have now. Like, I did so many cool things, but it was so overshadowed by what happened to me.
yeah.
And it wasn't until I got around these other women veterans that were like, you don't got to explain this to us. We know. And I could see in their eyes like they got it. And I just could not. And I'm not like a big crier. And I was really, really numb then too. It was like the very beginning of just barely realizing that I think I have a problem.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so to be embarrassed to admit that I was suicidal, to be embarrassed to um, even admit that I needed help, to go from that to I feel seen by 39 other women that I've never even met before for the first time in my life. And I'm coming out of like church stuff and all, all the things. Like, I had great friends. This is not a knock at them. This is me like taking all of that in and saying, this is too much. I literally felt like MST only happened to me. And it sounds crazy to me to say that now, because like, hello, duh,
Girl,
that
me
is not
too.
the case. And every
Yep.
veteran that I talk to is like, yeah, I didn't even know the term MST. And I remember the first time I heard it was, Vanessa Guillen's story came out, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I started seeing the Me Too movement, all these things. And I was like, it, it triggered me all over the place, and I had no idea what to do with myself. So I'm looking up on the internet, like, what is MST? And it took me into the bowels of the internet, and I was reading these things that people were saying happened to them. And I slammed my laptop shut and I was like, nope, I am not going there. I cannot do that. So I
Yeah,
was
because you
trying
put it in
to,
a box. Yeah.
ooh, buddy. Yeah. And I'm like, at that time thinking like, well, maybe I'm going to write a book about my story. And so I thought, naively, like that would help me to heal, would just be if I just wrote everything. And that took me on a journey that now I can say I'm really thankful for. But at the time, I was like, what have I done? And I don't think I'm going to survive this. So thank you for providing that space for these veterans. And it is so important because even though you've done some work and I've done some work and we've worked through what we call MST, all of those things, it's still hard to talk about. And I just want to say thank you for your compassion towards those veterans and for yourself that you're willing to sit here and have this conversation. And I would like for us to dig into a little bit more of that. This season on this podcast, I think is going to go a little deeper than we've gone in the past. And if you're comfortable sharing some of your journey, what that was like for you experiencing MST and then suicidal ideation. And we've talked a little bit about your story before, and you shared with me that those are some of the things you've walked through. So you are the perfect sacred witness for somebody. And maybe somebody needs to hear part of your story today that is saying, like, I thought I was alone in this. And this may break something open for them. And I want to say and preface this, I don't like to give a trigger warning because maybe it's what you actually need to hear. And maybe it's not a trigger. Maybe it's actually just an invitation. Maybe it's
Yeah.
an invitation to just look at what is possible if you
Yeah.
stick with it.
I also want to go back. So when we're talking about military sexual trauma or MST, especially within moral injury that I work, it's a lot of the time a betrayal-based trauma, but it can also come from like gender-based harassment, hostile work environments, hazing or harassing or bullying, extreme disrespect or humiliation, or sanctity trauma, like you were talking about, like profound betrayal by a chaplain or a religious leader. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be assault as well.
Yeah, that's a
There's
good
a
point.
lot of different things that fall under military sexual trauma.
And
With
before we go further on that, I think we did kind of fast forward there a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. Because we've already talked. So I'm like, wait, they didn't hear that part. Can you just talk just a little bit about what actually moral injury is? I mean, I know you just gave some examples, but I too did not realize that was a thing. So I'm like finding out I had MST and then I'm like, okay, but the army betrayed me. So how do I, you know, the military police that picked me up and found me in my underwear running down the street and didn't do anything. Like I didn't even realize that those were things that I felt betrayed by because it was just so much. So when that all breaks loose, you're like, "Oh great, more things for me to
yeah,
go through." And so a lot of the PTSD that we see in this community a lot of times isn't necessarily traumatic in the physical sense like you're talking about. It can be moral injury surrounding MST and or combat injuries, like all of it,
yeah,
right?
yep, yeah. So first, I also want to hit the point of what qualifies you for the retreat. One, we would talk about suicidal ideation. I do work for the Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant, and VOA is using that grant to address moral injury in veterans because there's a huge link between moral injury and suicidal ideation. Um, because when you lose your sense of purpose, your hope, and are feeling shameful, like that just increases on top of, um, unfortunately, suicide. So when we talk about moral injury is that wound that happens when something either violates your deeply held beliefs of what's right and what's wrong, that moral compass of who you are. And when we talk about your moral compass, it's what growing up directed your right and wrong, um, or violates your sense of safety, your honor, or just who you are as a person. It can come from something that you did that you could not stop, something that you witnessed, or a betrayal by somebody, by an institution as well, or a leader that you trusted. And there's a couple of different definitions, and I do want to give Jonathan Shea because he was the pioneer for moral injury. So his first definition was that moral injury, as a betrayal-based trauma of what's right by someone who holds a legitimate authority in higher stake situation. And he came out from this by working with Vietnam veterans. And then Brett Lentz kind of expanded that a little bit. That moral injury is a result from perpetrating, fail to prevent, or bearing witness, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held values and moral beliefs. And then our working model at VOA is that moral injury is a complex soul wound resulting from perpetrating, failure to act, witnessing, or experiencing betrayal that conflicts with one's deeply held values and moral beliefs. And so that is our working definition that we use. And we also use what we call the two mirror model. Dwayne Larson and Jeff Suss, it's called Care for the Sorrowing Soul. It's a great book that explains the two mirror model. And we use that when we are helping veterans with moral injury. And so it's just when I started moral injury work, there wasn't this specific conversation about military sexual trauma, about MST. And so when I realized after going through my own healing, and I'm always still healing, that was one of the things. I remember my very first group. Um, there was a woman that was in there. She's a good friend now, and a coworker. She looked at me and was like, "Bree, you are so together all the time." And when you
Mm-hmm.
did the group and you broke down and bared your soul, she was like, "Okay, like she's human." And I kind of forgot that telling my story and being a part of it helps other people, because if I don't, then I just look like, oh, look, I patched everything up and I put it all together. And that's not true, because healing is not linear.
Oh man, I'm so glad
It's
you said
always
that.
going.
Yeah, that's like, I think every episode since I've started this podcast, somewhere, someone, either myself or the guest says it's not linear. And also, that put togetherness can sometimes be a trauma response.
Yes,
I
it
found that out
is.
because I'm like, oh, I got my shit together.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I must be doing great because I don't have, no, I'm just avoiding.
Yeah.
so, so I get all
Masking.
of that.
Oh, yeah. Just
Yes.
put the mask on. I'm
Yes.
perfect. I know what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was still underneath all of that. You know, a lot of studies have shown with military sexual trauma that uh, survivors have a significant rate of like major depressive disorder, anxiety
Right.
disorders, panic disorders, sleep disruptions, emotional dysregulation, depression, anxiety, substance use, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts and behaviors and that's where I got to at a point. And so many survivors are not just struggling with emotions, but they're struggling with the chronic anxiety and
Yeah.
hypervigilance and, depression and sleep problems. So when all of that gets put on and you're masking it, eventually that mask is going to have to come off. And mine came off um, to the point of where I almost tried to commit, or didn't almost try. I tried to commit suicide. I was on the top of that bell curve. And
Mm,
I was sitting in my car writing a note to my kids, thinking that they were better off without me. And I
mm,
did all the safety things. I called my dad, I called my friends. Of course, I was just leaving drinking and hanging out. And I was at a high with a bunch of friends. And it was right after my divorce. And my kids were with their dad. I remember pulling in my driveway and sitting there, and all of a sudden the emotions dropped. That
mm.
just knowing that I was about to go to a home with nobody there, um, was painful. And of course, alcohol misuse, all the other stuff. And so I did what I was supposed to do when I called. And unfortunately, it was at 2 a.m. Nobody answered the phone.
Oh gosh.
And so I got to the point of, okay, this is it. So I went in, I drove into my driveway and shut the garage door behind me, and I sat and wrote a note. And all the things that I wanted to say to my kids, all the things, because I have two beautiful girls, and I'm so happy I'm here and their mom and with them now. And I just said I was done. I was done feeling hypervigilant. I was done having anxiety. And I remember I used to send a text to my ex and I was sitting there like shaking, or I have to shut off my phone, or I would call my best friend afterwards and just bawl because I was having these reactions that during the day, it took so much energy to be so put together, but at nighttime, I just completely was falling apart. Um, and so, by the grace of God, I got off of that, um, the top of the bell curve, and I came back down and I called 988, and the wonderful 988 lady, I wish I knew her name and I could thank her, but she strongholded me and was like, if you do not open up your garage door, the sheriffs are coming to your house real quick. And I was like, okay, that is something that I don't, because I still had the facade. I don't want my neighbors to know anything about it.
Right.
And so opened up the garage door. I talked to her for a little bit. I got a call from the sheriff's office, and that's when I started therapy right after that, which also led me into my journey of getting my doctoral degree in behavioral health because I wanted to understand why I got to the point that I did.
Yeah. Why am I like this? I can relate 100% to the asking the question and whew, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I am too. I couldn't imagine all the amazing things, and now I'm engaged again.
Oh,
Yay!
congratulations.
Yeah, it just happened a couple of weeks ago while we were in Jamaica.
Oh,
And so my life wouldn't be turning around. I wouldn't be able to help people. And so I really feel like it was the universe kind of stepping in and going, girl, you're not done yet. You are a healer. You're a helper. You have a purpose here, and I need you to find it.
hmm.
Your hope, your why. This is your why. And so when I moved into this position, I still had the distrust and I isolated or the emotional numbing or the difficulty being closeness and vulnerable. And so this job actually really helped me because I had to be vulnerable in order for people to want to talk to me, especially about suicide.
Yep.
And especially now that I run the military sexual trauma retreats, I have to open up and telling that story and bringing it from my flight or flight response. Because if I'm living in that all the time, I'm not going to be able to heal. So being able to sit there and talk about it and bringing it to my prefrontal cortex to really understand has helped me every time I do these, every time I do a retreat, every time I hear a veteran story, whether it be female or male, it it just helps me process even more when I share and connect with them. And so I'm really blessed and thankful to have the opportunity to be able to connect in veterans in such a deep way.
Yeah, and it sounds like they got a superstar prize when they hired you because you clearly are so passionate about what you do and it's important for us to understand that our story matters in in such a way, in such a deep, meaningful way. More so, I think I'm just finding this for myself. I feel like the more I grow and the more growth opportunities I have, which means the more challenges I have, like it's a growth opportunity. And that's how I have to choose to look at it because it's not a spiral. It's not, I'm going backwards. It's again, just not a linear journey. And so every time I have an opportunity to grow and learn something new, I am giving someone else another, like, step up. Like,
Yeah.
someone else is benefiting from some of my suffering, and it wasn't for nothing, and that's something, like, as a healer, like and I love that you called yourself that because it's okay for us to say, like, "Yeah, I'm a healer," but we are wounded healers. So we can only pour from the wounds that we have. So if you're, um, walking me through something that you've experienced, you're pouring out of that wound into me or into another person and really seeing them. And it takes an incredible amount of bravery to be vulnerable enough to be seen like that
Yeah.
and to be seen and know that you're still fully loved, even if the internet doesn't say so. Even if, I get thumbs down on this episode and you suck. I don't really care because somebody else needed to hear what was said. And it takes that ego has to get out of the way for
Yep.
me to be able to be vulnerable enough to be real and make a mistake and tell you I don't have it all together. I really don't.
Yep.
And I
And
just keep
that's
putting
okay.
right. And I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Has there ever been a veteran or an experience through the retreats that you have run or just the groups that changed you unexpectedly in a way?
Oh, I think everyone has changed me. And I think that's the hardest thing about answering this question is because every story, even with my male veterans that sit down and have conversations with me, and I've had some amazing conversations with my male counterparts and my brothers at arms. Each story is so unique that I could pull a little bit of myself, and it doesn't matter what era of war that they're in, um, that I can connect with. But girl, I'll have to say, my first retreat that I did, um, I didn't realize the impact. And of course, I'm very professional. I have to do the emotional numbing. I have to do all of that while I'm there, in order to provide a retreat because I'm the facilitator going through it. But afterwards, I was destroyed.
Mm,
I had the biggest emotional breakdown that I've had in a while.
yeah. And you segued into my exact next question. There's a cost, right, to
Mhm.
holding this kind of space and to doing this kind of work. And I'll ask you the same thing, like, what do you do to take care of yourself in that,
That's difficult because when you have 2 young kids as well,
right?
when you create life, they always come first. But a lot of the times, so my spouse now, he's a huge camper, and I have now grown to love camping and being outdoors. But I'm a huge dancer. I absolutely love to dance. So I would put on music. I would just dance around my kitchen. My girls, whenever we do transitions back and forth and they're having hard transitions, we'll dance it out in the
I
kitchen
love
and
that.
play
Yeah,
music. And I did yoga for a little while. I should get back into yoga. I always think of like the body keeps the score,
yes, ma'am.
he always talks about like yoga and meditation, and
Yeah,
I have a hard time sitting in silence. I think that's why I'm always doing something, always helping, always going, or I either have to numb it out, like get stuck to my phone on TikTok and scroll.
mhm.
Just because every conversation that has happened in my head for the last 15 years, if I said one thing wrong, we were talking about that perfection, all of a sudden I will walk through that whole conversation of why didn't I say this or what did I go with that way or anything else like that. And so I've noticed silence is not the best thing for me in my journey. I've tried, not very good at it. I will say that I'm not a silent person, and anyone that knows you, I'm a very loud person a lot of the time.
Oh, I can relate. I can relate.
I say what I want. I'm very opinionated.
I love it.
I'm a dancer. Dancing is my way of releasing and moving my body or
Yeah.
screaming songs at the top of my lungs. Even when I'm feeling big emotions, because they say emotions last for 90 seconds,
Yep.
playing a song and I scream it out helps me get that.
Me too.
So,
I have found, and I've talked about this before, screaming is so therapeutic for me.
oh yeah.
Um, and I used to kind of make fun of myself about it. I was like, these like, I'm sort of screaming or I'm screaming out this song. But now I don't even need music, girl. I would just get in my car and I crack the window enough so whatever comes out goes out the window. I'm like, ah, like
You're like,
it
hear it.
just like it has to go and it feels so liberating to me. Janine and I actually screamed off the top of a mountain. You have to ask her about that story. I'll
Oh,
let her tell
nice.
you.
Yeah.
But it's movement is huge for getting those things off of our nervous system so that they can move through and process them through. And that's been a huge part of my healing and what I can really appreciate in there. There's all kinds of suicide prevention programs and there's so many different things. Some of them are programs that promote change and tools and give you all the things you need to walk you ABC through here's how you deal with this. And then there's some transformational programs that are like, no, let's get down deep into all the things like the source of your relationships. Let's dig into your childhood. Let's look at your ACEs score. Let's, all of these things.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think I'm going to break into 27 pieces. I can't take all of this. So I'm saying all that to say that it is very much an individual journey. And I appreciate you sharing with us that dancing is huge for you. I love that too. And just moving your body in general, I found for me is an incredible way to take care of myself. And it's interesting when people ask me, "Well, you do this podcast and you do forensic nursing and you how do you do all these things?" And I'm like, "I do a lot of meditating, which is not easy for me because I also have a squirrel brain and do all the things, but giving myself the space and learning how to take care of my nervous system so I can
Yes.
assure whoever I'm with, like, you don't need to worry about me. I am taking care of myself." Because there was a time, I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but there was a time where I thought I was helping by holding space and absorbing and being there for people, but I wasn't releasing it. I didn't know how to release it. Um,
100%.
and
Yep.
I thought I was releasing it by just like, okay, I prayed about it on my way home, or just like maybe shake my hands a little bit, like, okay, I'm done with this. But I didn't realize I was really internalizing that. And I knew I was doing that because I was waking up thinking about that person, or would find that like sort of like rescuer part of me coming up like, "Oh, I bet if I told him this." And I was the first to fire off 27 books and, "Oh, try this website, try this program, do this, do that." And then find myself going, "Well, if they would have just done what I told them to do, they wouldn't be suffering so much," which is so arrogant and so rude. And I apologize to anyone listening if I ever did that to you without you asking me to, because
Yeah.
now I'm realizing we have to take ownership of our own healing, myself included.
Yep.
So if you want something that I have, then I'm happy to share it with you if you ask, but to push it on somebody was only just causing me to feel even more like, what am I doing in this space? Should I even be in this space? And re-traumatizing people in a way that I didn't realize when I really was just trying to help. And so sometimes the helpers need help learning how to help properly, and that's called boundaries. So I don't know how
Yeah.
we got
Oh,
off on that rabbit
boundaries.
trail.
What? I don't
That's a
know.
whole nother episode,
Oh, there's
Breanna.
boundaries.
A whole
Oh,
nother
what
episode.
is that? Yeah, I had to cross those boundaries to realize that
Yeah.
they were there, and that's a
Yep.
learning experience because,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, and so it just it was just it was just hard learning that it is okay to say no, and I tell my girls this all the time. No is a sentence.
Sure is. I have to tell myself that a lot because hear me the right way, I will say yes to things and it's not because I feel obligated. I really want to do them. And somehow I end up overloading myself and then I'm like, why do I feel bad? And why am I tired? And why? So I have to have those people in my life that, hey, you said because I love you that I can tell you these things. And I'm like, dang it.
Yep.
Yeah, I am doing that, aren't I? And
I-
so it's important to find your people and have those boundary conversations that, if somebody else tries to put those boundaries on me, I'm like, you don't know me. Don't tell me I'm doing too much. You're not in my inner circle. You can
Yep.
only tell me that if you really know, because I think as a healer for me, I do have more capacity than the average person. And it's not always been that way. But I have to learn to recognize my capacity. Um, and that is just by really listening to my body and like, am I taking on too much? And even this morning I
Yep.
was driving and I was like, man, I have this weird like flutter tightness behind my chest this morning. And there was nothing in particular going on in my mind that I could think of. And I really had to like just slow down, like, where is this coming from? And then I realized there was about 5 things that I in the back of my mind was running ahead that I need to do already for tomorrow. And I'm like, I'm still in today. But it took me slowing down enough and asking myself, like, what is it? Where is this coming from? Oh, it's because I'm not present. I'm thinking about tomorrow when I actually have these things I need to do today. So
Yep.
it's just a really hard thing to learn to do when you're in the thick of it and people are telling you, do this boundary, have this, do that. And you're like, I can't even take a shower. Okay.
How do you
Can you
develop
just,
boundaries?
yeah,
Like, what are
yeah,
healthy boundaries?
yeah,
What
yeah.
happens
And
when someone gets mad that you set a boundary that you've never
oh,
done? Like, there's so much
it's
more
the
to it.
worst.
Yep.
Just thinking about that still gives me a little lump in the throat. I don't like when people are mad at me.
Yeah.
But I'm getting real quick at getting over that. Like I'm much better at that now. Like you can be mad at me. You're allowed to think that. You can be mad. I'll own my part if I need to, but to not take that codependent side of it anymore is such a huge relief. We're like getting off on all the rabbit trails right now, but
Yeah.
but it's just so important because it's all tied together. Like I don't know
Well,
how to
especially,
articulate this perfectly, but, like, I thought for a long time, like, I just had all this mishmash thinking and all this stuff going on because I had, been raped and had sexual trauma. Dude, no. Like, yes, that's part of the story, but all the things surrounding that before and after, the trauma wasn't what happened to me. Yeah, that was terrible. And I wish that on no one. And I'm sorry that it happened to me. I am. I'm sorry that it happened to me. I'm sorry that it happened to you. And I'm sorry that it happened to anyone. And it's not okay. But what I did with that is where the trauma set in. So
yes,
allowing that to just be buried is what caused me to have all of these things that you listed earlier, the hypervigilance, the insomnia, the body keeps the score. I say that all the
yeah.
time. And there's I barely scratched the surface of that. Like I'm going to be a lifelong student of figuring this out.
Oh,
And
100%.
and I
Yep.
hope so. I hope that I never figure it out because I want to continue to grow. So it's
Oh, there's
important.
always more. Psychology is always growing. We're always learning new things. And, when we're talking about like moral injury, especially with military sexual trauma and it being that betrayal based trauma, PTS and PTSD is that fear base. So you relive when you have the PTS episode, you relive how you felt during that life threatening event.
Mhm.
Moral injury. So PTSD often says that I'm not safe, and that's why your flight or flight response starts to go. Moral injury often says that I'm not worthy because
Mm,
with the fear base, you have all of those, like the depression and hypervigilance and all of that goes with having PTSD or PTS. Moral injury is often really centered around shame and guilt and self
yeah.
blame and feeling dirty or unforgivable or loss of meaning or spirituality. Um, Moral injury usually doesn't just stay in the military. And I know we're talking about, military sexual trauma and moral injury. You can get a moral injury anywhere.
Yep.
Anywhere. So moral injury doesn't just stay in the military. It usually often follows veterans home, into their marriages, into
Yep.
parenting, into friendships, into intimacy, into the ability to feel or to not feel emotionally safe with others.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to live with every day of always feeling that you're not emotionally safe or saying that I am not worthy.
And
And
that's a big distinction. Like
Mhm.
the difference between fear-based reliving versus I'm a piece of crap. I'm defective, I'm helpless, and I'm alone, and I don't deserve anybody to help me. And when you put those 2 things together, which is the place I found myself
Mhm.
in and, like, I'm sure the place you found yourself too, that's how you end up closing the garage door. Like,
Yep.
that's what happens, and it is so important to break that stigma and working with, um, like yourself, you work with suicide prevention. I wanted to ask you, what gives you hope when you're facing some of these difficult conversations with these people? What gives you hope in those moments?
Watching their shoulders go down and they sit back and take a breath.
Mm,
So I teach assist trainings as well, and one of the biggest things is that you have to give them the agency and the choice. So everyone's talking about trauma informed care and everything else like that. You have to give them the choice. You have to give them the agency. They have to be in control. Um, and so one of the biggest things during those moments of even when someone is getting to the point of just saying, "Would you like a glass of water?" and them saying, "Yes." Okay, I get them a cold glass of water to help with their nervous system and to help calm that down. We do the 5 things you see, you hear, you taste, you smell. Tell them to take off their shoes and what does the floor feel like? What does this chair that you're sitting in feeling like? And once you start seeing their nervous system kind of relax and they actually take a deep breath from their belly, not just in their chest, is a moment that gives me hope.
mm,
Um, because they have carried something for so long. And this might be the first time that they're talking about suicide. It might be the first time, that they have even realized that this is what it's leading up to. Because we have so much stigma and shame when we talk about suicide. And I try to break that barrier, one, by telling my story, and two, just knowing that they're not alone. And we're going back to the isolation again. And so many veterans are distrusting because of the system, because of different things, and they emotionally numb, and start unhealthy coping skills, which many unhealthy coping skills usually start as survival strategies.
Yep.
And that's how they survived. And so when someone is finally getting it and finally understanding, just watching them breathe from their belly for the first time and having that moment just to relax and process, that's what gives me hope. It continues to be the reason why I do, is because just even seeing that little bit in a veteran lets me feel like they are starting to, right, when we do it in assist training, it's that but, that if, that why. It's lights, it's life's side speaking out. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to understand it. You don't have to fully um, know your purpose immediately. You think after I started therapy that I was like, I'm going to go get my doctorate degree now. Like, I'm going to go figure it out. Like,
We
no,
wish. No.
like, no. But there is some part of me, my life side, that was speaking out, that was saying, but why? Possibly, maybe there is an uncertainty there that I called 988.
Yeah.
There was something there that was telling me, nope, you're not quite done yet. And it took me
Yeah.
a little while to figure out. I went the complete opposite and got my MBA. So it's not like I went straight into my doctoral degree. I was like, nope, switching to finance, and went and got my MBA for all of that. I just, that moment, that glimmer of life side kind of poking out, that keeps me going. Because if you can get that, even just one veteran, and Janine again, talk about it all the time. If it's just one, that's all it takes. That's
Yeah.
all I need. Give me one at a time. Even I do
Mhm.
these retreats and have these conversations, and I love doing them. But even that one person that comes and needs to sit into my office, or I get a phone call going, "Hey, Bree, I have this veteran that is, having extreme suicidal ideation and is actively, in that. Can you please come and talk? Can you please come and help?" I have seen multiple of them again, and just knowing that they're around for me to be here to help again if need be. I pray that that's not the way that they find their way, but there's still times where I struggle with my
Right.
suicidal ideation. There's some times, but I've gained the coping skills to be able to walk through it. Um, because like I said, my survival strategies in the beginning, they weren't very healthy, and they became very unhealthy coping.
Yeah.
And so being able to see that in somebody, and I know that there must have been a person that saw it in me, that I hope, and I want to be that person to somebody else, that
Yeah. That's beautiful.
hey, there is an uncertainty there. So let's figure this out. Are you
Yeah.
ready to figure it out? If not, let's just sit for a while. I'm okay. I remember sitting on a doorstep with a veteran for 3 hours, just in silence,
Mhm.
not leaving, not talking, not, telling my story, not trying to pull their story out of them,
Yeah,
just
it's so
being
important.
present and being there with them.
Presence is the medicine. I've said that over and over, like, presence is the medicine. Like, you don't have to know what to say or what to do, and in fact, maybe just saying, "I don't really know what to say here, but I'm right here." Like, I'm physically right here, and that co-regulating with somebody, and I've learned some hard lessons that way, and, I firmly believe, like, "You gotta tell your story, you gotta tell your story," and trying to pull things out of people. If you just say it, the shame dies. And those things are true, but like there's a time and a place. And I'm not your therapist. And this is probably not the place for you to, without taking some care. And I'm so appreciative of my own journey and realizing that, because I think it makes me a better witness. And that's what we talk about, is like that sacred witnessing. And that literally is what it is just, defiance of silence. Yes, we need to break the stigma. We don't want to be silent any longer. And I love how you said in the beginning, like, women are coming out more, like telling their truths and saying, like, no, this happened to me and it's not okay. And being able to see each other, but breaking the silence on that aspect, but also on the other side, sitting with silence so that you can hold the space for somebody else. Those two things are important, that they exist at the same time. And you just described exactly what being a sacred witness is. It's just sitting with somebody, and you don't have to fix them. And I can appreciate the times that somebody just sat with me. And I'm a big talker, so it didn't take much to get me to say stuff, but
Yeah.
it took me a lot. I had to learn the hard way to stop talking. And I had some people that loved me along the way to say, like, listen, you talk too much, in the sense of, like, I just need to be witnessed. And so it was that journey for me. And I'm like, okay, I talk too much. How can I use my voice though? Because I have one, but I'm not worthy to use this voice. Like, I'm just going to say stupid things. And then, I wake up one morning and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast. So here we are. But I guess I'm saying all that just to say, like, you embody and just represented so well exactly what this podcast is about, and exactly the types of people that are healers. And that I just thank you for being in that space, because we need you. We need you. And I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you have this mission that, clearly you're so passionate about, because people need you. People need your story. People need your um, just your spirit. And I can just see that on you, that you're just a bright light in that place, wherever you're at, wherever you're going in these retreats. I know that the women that are going to go to those are going to be really, really blessed. If they want to find these retreats, how do they find you? Do they have to live in a specific state? Is this nationwide? Tell us a little bit how we can get that word out even more.
So these retreats are specifically just because VOA is by region. And so our region is the Northern Rockies. So it's Montana, Wyoming, and a little bit of South Dakota. And they would just go on to VOA Moral Injury and click the retreats. And there is a link to sign up for
Okay.
the retreats.
So if you're in the Northern Rockies and you're hearing this,
Yes.
go sign up.
I hope one day these will be nationwide across every single
Hey,
state. Like,
there are things.
let's bring
Yep.
this to
Yeah.
every VOA out there. Let's bring this to
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to talk about one more thing real quick that we talked about when we were initially talking about having this conversation in this space. You mentioned something that struck me, and you talked about, and this is something, like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I'm going to go there. People don't want to hear about this. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about it, especially certain men, especially in certain spaces. And when you talk about veteran organizations, and like myself, I went to one veteran organization, and that was the bro club of the bro clubs, and nobody, and so I'm not knocking them or making them wrong. It just for me was like, oh, I can't trust any of this. And when you start to have the conversations with them about moral injury and sexual trauma, um, they don't want to hear it. They want to talk about something else or guide it another way. And you said something in our call about your directness and how you handle those situations. And I would love for you just to share a little bit what that's like for you, stepping into those spaces and talking about this in a room full of people that maybe don't want to hear it. Like, people listening to this podcast, they are, tuning in, they want to hear this
Thing to do.
conversation, or
Yeah.
they can just close it and say, screw them, I don't want to hear this. And that's fine. That's their choice, and totally honor and respect that. But when you're going into a space where there are veterans that maybe need to hear what you have to say, and this is the reception that you're getting, do you feel like that climate is changing, or is it still an uphill battle? Like, how much more work do we have to do in that space?
We're always going to have to do work in that space because it is a space. Unfortunately, it's something like we talked about earlier that it's so common, and it happens to men and women. And
Yeah.
so because that part is not changing and veterans are still coming out with it, both male and female, and I do feel like the numbers that I said earlier aren't the real numbers because of underreporting or people not connected to the VA or something like
Yeah,
that.
agree 100%, and that's a whole nother topic.
That's a
Whole
whole,
nother topic, a
that's a
whole
whole
nother
other
show.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing about suicide rates. I always
Mhm.
think that they're
Mhm.
higher just because of misreporting or over
Yeah.
drinking or overdoses or, you know, car crashes that were an attempt but deemed as
Yeah.
car crash. And so I try to be respectful a lot of the time. But there are conversations that need to be had that are really uncomfortable. And when I approach uh, organizations that have a hard time with hearing topics about military sexual trauma, I first start talking about conversations that they know. Talking about veterans and military sexual or military. I'm so used to saying that back and forth, talking about veterans, and then going into how hard it is, about transitions, especially coming from military life to civilian life, going to black and white to a whole lot of gray. And a lot of veterans hate living in the gray area. Um, and then I start kind of moving it on to moral injury and what moral injury is. And then I slowly build the conversation, only because there are parts and there are times where I will have to be direct. And the time that you're talking about, um, I went through all of that already. And I got to a point of going, listen, we just sat and had a conversation about how you don't have enough female members. The younger generation is not joining your organization. There's a systematic problem within that organization and all these different things. And because you're not hitting the topics that are actually concerning us, it feels like you are stuck in an era where certain things aren't allowed to be talked about. And this is why you're going to have a really hard time with the younger generation of veterans that are coming through, because change is inevitable. Everything has to change. You're not going to stay just basic business model too. Businesses that don't grow and change usually are the ones that get left behind. You guys are having a hard time. You're trying to figure out numbers. You're trying to figure out things because you're being so stuck in where you are. You're not growing. You're not changing. And this is a topic that we need to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Um, and it's tough. I mean, we could talking about moral injury and, suicide. The highest rate of death by suicide is usually by a gun. And we live in a very gun right states, especially up in the Northern Rockies, Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota. And my family's hunters, everything else. I am not against guns at all whatsoever, but there's also the mental health aspect. And so it's the same thing. When you have a touchy conversation, I come at it of more of a logic, more of a business model. And that's where, surprisingly, my business degree has came into it um, very well, because when we're talking about, a lot of the times, the conversations that I have, like, you're not going to take my guns away. Like, you can't tell me when to have it. And, when I am suicidal or have those thoughts, like, I could keep safe, like, I'll give them to somebody. And I'm like, okay, when have you had those thoughts before? Your prefrontal cortex completely shuts off and you are not thinking and having a conversation with me the way that we're doing it now. And I
Right.
know that because I was there.
Mhm.
I was not thinking. I was not logical. I was in my emotional side of my brain. My amygdala and my hippocampus were going berserk. One of the analogies that I like is, there's a horse in barns. There was a horses in a barn and it got lit on fire. And now all of my horses are scattering and running. And so when that scattering and running is happening, we're not processing things through our prefrontal cortex. We're not using our thinking side of our brain. And so we do things that unfortunately have permanent consequences. The same thing applies when I talk about military sexual trauma. It's always going to be there until that a different system has other things in place. It's always going to be there. Um, when the military, when people transition out of the military, it's always going to be an issue for men and women, no matter what. So, how are we going to address this? Because if you work with an organization that addresses, suicide, because for a long time that wasn't addressed in veterans, a lot of people think it's just weak mindedness when we talk about suicide. But now we're realizing that it's a crisis that's happening with veterans coming out. That's the same thing with military sexual trauma. It's a crisis
Yeah.
that's happening. And the more we try to stigmatize it, the more we try to put it away, the higher the numbers are going to start growing.
Yeah.
And the higher the suicides will grow, and everything will just keep going. So we
Ugh.
need to stop this, and we need to talk about it and actually have the conversations, because now there's so many organizations, that have suicide prevention as a part of their mainstream, which is fantastic. But you know how long it took for us to get to this point?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's be on the forefront with, military sexual trauma, because it's not going away.
Right. It's not going away. And to be fair, like, you come out, you transition from your military service and you have all these things. And it's rare for somebody to just come out the gate and be like, yep, these things happen. Usually we stuff it down for a while before we can't anymore. And then we're like, okay,
10 years.
I guess I have, for me, it was longer. And I'm like, ooh, but what I was going to say is that going to an organization that's stuck just adds to the moral injury. It just adds
Yep.
to it. And that's the point I'm trying to make is I just want people to be awake to it and aware. Like, yeah, maybe me as an individual, I can't walk into an organization and be like, this needs to change, but I can affect those around me and be willing to talk about it and have the hard conversations. And no, I don't need to walk into Starbucks and be like, hey, y'all, you need to hear all this. But when the opportunity arises, like that flutter in my chest, I'm going to have to fly through that flutter and maybe just be a little more bold about like, no, this needs to change. And I'll be honest, I avoid the VA. I'm not having a racket against the VA right now. That's not why I'm saying it. But in general, for me, I have found other methods that feel safer to me. And I get that. So that alone, like I'm one of the numbers that didn't
Mhm.
report. So now officially it's it's all reported. That's a whole nother thing. But I just, the rate that we're losing veterans and the rate that um, I would love to see some data. I'm sure there's some out there. I don't know how they would even collect all this data in that way. I'm not a researcher. I wish I was. But how does that correlate? You may know this. How does that correlate the suicide rate versus with the MST? Like, do we have any data that puts that together so that you can say, yep, these particular veterans that committed suicide actually had MST? Um, like, is there solid data on that? If we can trust any data in that,
So,
for that matter.
yeah, so research actually connects military sexual trauma with PTSD, increases um, a person's PTSD and their symptoms. Um, Usually is connected with depression, suicide, substance use. A systematic review found that military sexual assault had a stronger relationship with adverse mental health outcomes than other military experiences.
Yeah.
And um, usually social support is what helped reduce those outcomes. So
Yeah.
there is research that is out there. Military sexual trauma is is strongly associated with more severe PTSD symptoms and chronic symptoms over time. And when I mean chronic symptoms, it could be intimate partner relationships, it could be depression,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety,
Yeah.
even physical health. So, one of the things that I talk about with moral injury is the physical health that happens. And so, just a couple of things like MST, moral injury, is strongly associated with chronic pain, oh my gosh, tum-
Gastroenteritis.
yes, tummy issues, headaches, fatigue, autoimmune inflamed problems, sleep disruptions, nervous system dysregulations, and so
Mm-hmm.
eventually the mental and will start to show in the physical.
Yep.
And trauma doesn't just show up in lived memories. It shows in the nervous system, and it also shows up physically within the body. And so when we're talking about our nervous system, like your palms start sweating, your heart starts fluttering, like I realize I start speaking more and having conversations, but there is help out there, and healing really does happen in connections.
Yeah.
Shame, especially moral injury shame and guilt and self-blame, um, usually grows in silence, and
Yep.
recovery grows in safe relationships and safe communities and being seen without judgment. And so when you're pulling all that in, we need to talk about this. We need to have avenues where people can go to be able
Mm-hmm.
to heal and build their moral resiliency. When we're talking about moral injury, I know one of the things we talked about on the phone is how do we heal from this? Because we were talking about the bad all the time and about the unfortunate things and the side effects that happen with someone that has experienced moral injury and then MST, and then on top of that, having PTS or PTSD. How do we start healing from it? How do we start growing into a place to where even though PTSD, moral injury often overlap because, the fear based and the value based wound. Um, Moral injury more sounds like what happened to me should have never happened to me. And so, how do we rebuild survivors' moral resilience so we can start working through these things? Because there's a lot of great things for PTSD, like EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot of great stuff. But if we're also not treating the moral injury aspect of it, their purpose, their why, their hope, a lot of times people start falling into spirals again because we're not
Yeah.
building up that moral aspect of it.
Yeah, that's like where the soul work comes in. And that was the piece for me was like, okay, I knew all the things. Like my brain knew I'm a smart person. I could figure out I'm doing my homework. I'm doing what I'm asked to do. But like, why am I still having all these things? And it was realizing that that soul piece was missing because what happened to you was horrible and it broke your soul. It broke you open.
Yep.
And that somatic piece is so important to be able to move those things through your body. And um,
And your
we
soul
could
could be your inner conscious too. Like I get that question a lot, that it's specifically about religion, and moral injury is not about
Right,
religion. It's about
right.
your morals and ethics. And so if someone had an issue with the soul part of it, they could do their inner self, their inner
Mhm,
conscious, their
mhm.
Jiminy Cricket part of themselves,
Yeah, yeah, the
Um,
spidey sense,
the
that's what I call
spidey
it,
sense, yeah,
the
you always
spidey
get that
sense.
pit in your belly.
Yep, I
I
tell I tell my kids, "You know that the Holy Spirit is talking to you when you have the spidey sense," and they're like, "Oh,
Oh,
the spidey," they know what that
that's
is.
it,
It's a
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
but I do wanna touch on, moral resiliency, just because hope and recovery does happen. And it's so important because all it takes is asking for help or clicking that link or applying, even if it's someone's first time ever deciding to do a retreat or even talk to me about it. Um, but recovery is possible. I don't say recovery is that it's never going to happen and you're never going to get activated again or something else is not going to activate you. it's going to happen, and you're going to have to process and work through it, and making sure we're getting those healthy coping skills instead of those unhealthy survival strategies that turned into coping skills. But there's are a lot of protective factors like peer support, social connection, trauma informed care, um, safe relationships. That was a big one for me. My spouse now has graciously, and thank you, I love you, shout out to Leon, has allowed me space to not be okay and
That's
has
really
loved me
important.
through it.
Yeah. And not everyone has that. And I want to just acknowledge, oh man, I also am blessed to have that for myself.
Yeah.
But I am in relationship with those who do not have that. And I see and feel the anguish of that. So I just want to acknowledge those that are listening that are saying, yeah, yeah, not for me though. And I see you and I
Yeah.
acknowledge that. And that is really hard. It's
Yes.
really hard. So reaching out to somebody else or just finding your people. But I would be wrong to not just say like, not everyone has that, and that's something special if you do. Um, but if you do not, like, you are still worthy of that, and you are still loved, and you still deserve to have somebody in your corner, even if that's a paid therapist. Like there is somebody
Yep.
that can be in your corner. It does not have to be an intimate partner that way. So hear that the right way. I don't want anyone to be confused or shame themselves that they don't have that, or their spouse is a problem, or their significant other is maybe struggling too. Like there's points in my marriage I've talked about before. My husband and I both have had to work through some things. So it hasn't always been this way. It's taken a lot of work to be able.
Yep.
I had to be a safe person for him to be a safe person. Like it took a lot of work on that. And that is also a whole nother podcast.
And the whole
We can talk about.
we're just like
We are
squirrel.
just squirreling everywhere. I'm so
Oh.
sorry, everyone. But Breanna, I do want to ask you one last thing. If you could go back and give yourself, because we did talk about this earlier a little bit about transitioning out of the military, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself a piece of advice when you transitioned out of the Navy, what would you say to your former self, or to somebody who's transitioning out now and not sure what to do with all this?
Oh man, I would probably give it to myself before I got out. Um, Only because if I would have started working through this earlier, just imagine how far that I would be instead of pushing it away. So the first thing that I would do would be really to talk about moral resilience, and that you can. Only because my silence protected my moral injury.
Mm,
And so because I didn't have a safe place to tell my story. And so the first thing that I would do would be to one, rebuild safety first. Um, because I surrounded myself um to what I feel like was unsafe relationship. But I dug into that so deeply that no matter what happened, I stuck through it. Um, I would tell my story, but with control, because I remember those nights of getting out of the military and using alcohol, and then just all of a sudden word vomiting, because there's a part of me that wants to heal, that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard, but I'm numbing so badly that the only way that it's coming out is if I take off, that part of my brain. And so I would tell myself to tell my story, but in control, so I can start processing and working through it.
hmm.
Um, I mean, hindsight's always 2020, but I always would separate shame from responsibility, because I took on, um, I took both of them on as the same thing,
Yeah.
and that was really hard, um, that all of this was me. And that's one of the things that we do in the retreats is it's called a responsibility pie. And that hit me hard the first time that I saw the responsibility pie because I was controlling what I couldn't control in the time. So because I can control my grief and my shame, I took it on the responsibility 100%.
Yeah, that's profound. There's a profound difference, and it takes a lot of work to get to that point for
Mhm.
you to even be able to articulate that. Like, you could tell that you've done some work around that, and that was a big me too as well. Just realizing that piece, um, and even when I first was presented with that type of information, I was like, "Yeah, no, that doesn't land for me. This is totally nope, this I am responsible for myself." And I had it so confused and so
Yeah.
mixed up. So, thank you for clarifying that, and just truly, like, I know that your younger versions of you are so proud of you. Like, you're amazing, and this has been
I had to grieve that part of me as well. That
yes,
was a big
yes,
one, is that
yes.
I am rebuilding a new human being.
Mhm.
I didn't know how to not be that person from before. I
Yeah,
wanted to be that same person from before. I wanted
yeah,
to have that light that was different, and had to grieve that loss. Um,
yeah.
and that was a big thing for me because we're not survivors are not only grieving what happened, they're grieving who they were before.
Yeah, and so many times I would say, "I just wanna be myself again," and I have realized now, no, I do not.
Mhm.
I do not want to be that version of me. At the time, that's what I felt, but that version of me was,
Yeah.
um, locked away. There were so many things. So grief is a huge part of any journey, and grief is the part that hurts. So if you're trying to figure out
Push it away. I wish I
what yeah,
grieved
like,
way earlier. If
"Ooh,
I was
buddy," and
told my younger self, I'd be like, "Grieve."
grieve,
Like,
grieve, lady, grieve.
don't push it away.
There's a kind of a friendly little joke that goes around my friend circle, shout out to you guys, you know who you are, because in some of the 12-step work that I did, I was, like, coming to terms with this grief, and I had just gone through Save a Warrior, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready to grieve," after being numb for so long and having just, like, this little piece of this grief show up, and I was like, "Oh, that's grief? I didn't know that." So it was really, like, freeing, and so I'm, like, lighting the candles, and I'm like, okay, tonight's the night. I'm gonna grieve. And I go sit in my literally, this is a true story. I go sit in my recliner and I'm like in this like meditative position, like I'm waiting. I'm like waiting for
Oh,
the
no.
grief to come. And I was like, this is bullshit. Nothing's happening. Like I was like,
You're like,
what
"Click."
is going on? And I'm like, God, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm giving you this time and I'm ready. And I went back to my 12-step group the next week and I'm legitimately telling this story like I sat down, I try to grieve and like I'm very like demonstrative when I'm telling a story. So I'm showing them like I'm sitting like this. And the leader starts laughing so hard. And at first I was like, why is she laughing? Like, I was dead serious that my question to her was, how does one grieve? Like, I literally said, how does one grieve? I'm ready. Like, nothing's happening. And I can laugh now, but oh my gosh. And that was a legit question. How does one grieve? And I think she wasn't sure what to do with me because I was like, I'm here for it, but I don't know how to do it. And boy, was that a journey. So grief's a whole nother, we've got lots of episodes coming up on
Yep.
grief this season. So
Yeah.
we'll get to some of that. But thank you, Breanna, so much for just your presence and you being here and taking the time to have this very difficult conversations. And I just, um, Godspeed to you and blessings to you for doing the work that you do and taking the time to share a little bit of your heart. And I hope that what people heard today was just a lot of hope because that's what I heard. And even though we have hard conversations to have, even though there's still bad things that are going to happen to good people, even though we can't save everyone, we can save ourselves and we can be light to others. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I'm so thankful that you were here. And any parting words you'd like to say to our listeners? Floor is
Um,
yours.
yeah. thank you again for having me on, Val. And it has been such an honor, one, just to be able to talk and kind of shine a light on moral injury, especially it's been coined since the 1994, but I still run into people every day. They're like, what is moral injury? So thank you so much for allowing me to talk about that and the specialty of what I do. And one parting thing that I would like to say is that healing from MST moral injury or just moral injury in general is not about pretending that it didn't happen to you. Um, it's about rebuilding safety and reclaiming your voice, grieving what was lost, learning who is trustworthy, reconnecting with your values, remembering that the shame never belonged to the survivor, that moral resilience is not about bouncing back to who you were, but it's becoming a new whole you again with truth and support and purpose. And that's what I would like for them to take away from this, is that healing is possible.
I love that. Thank you so much. And like we do every episode, witnesses, we'll just take a moment, ground ourselves. We heard a lot of stuff today. If that activated anything in you, tough feelings, anything like that, please reach out to a trusted professional or a friend or somebody, but don't sit with this alone. I know that that was a lot to hear, and maybe it opened up some stuff for you, but know that you are loved and worthy of being witnessed. And let's just take a moment and let go of the things that don't serve us and things that we're not meant to carry. So take a deep breath in, raise your palms to the sky. And as you blow out, push those palms up to the sky and push it away. Let it go. Thank you, Breanna.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back. Oh my goodness. Don't you just love Breanna? I could have talked to her so much longer. I hope you took something from what she had to say. You do not have to carry things alone. We talked about a lot of stuff throughout our discussion. She returned again and again to the importance of connection, community, and the courage it takes to tell the truth about what we're carried. So those of you that are listening that may be carrying something heavy today, I hope this conversation reminded you that there's no shame in asking for support and no weakness in allowing yourself to be seen. Thank you for spending this time with us and witnessing Breanna's story. Until next time, take what serves you and leave what doesn't, and remember that you are worthy of being witnessed.